Golden eyes locked on her in the fading light. Leo, the lion she saved, roaring defiance as poachers closed in, his massive frame shielding Emma from death. The air cracked with tension, wild and raw. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. 5 years ago, Emma Johnson's life was defined by quiet dedication. As a volunteer with a wildlife conservation group, her days were spent trekking through dense brush and scorching savannas, cataloging species and monitoring animal movements. But nothing had prepared her for the day she heard those piercing cries. They cut through the still air like a desperate plea, raw, urgent, full of terror. Emma's heart pounded as she followed the sound, pushing through thorny undergrowth until she found him, a fragile lion cub tangled mercilessly in a cruel poacher's snare. His golden fur was matted with dirt and blood, his small body trembling with pain and fear. The desperation in those wide, amber eyes struck Emma like a physical blow. This wasn't just another animal in trouble. This was a life hanging by the thinnest thread. Without hesitation, Emma dropped her gear and began the painstaking work of freeing him, mindful of every movement so as not to worsen his injuries. She could feel the tension in his tiny muscles, the way he flinched with every touch, haunted by years of suffering from humans he didn't yet understand. She whispered soft reassurances, though she wasn't sure if he could hear her over the cacophony of his own terror. It took hours to cut through the metal trap and gently lift the cub free. When she finally cradled him in her arms, exhausted and shaken, Emma's world shifted. The weight of responsibility settled on her chest like an immovable stone. She couldn't just walk away and leave him to fend for himself, not after the cruelty he'd endured, not when he'd trusted her enough to stop struggling. Back at the makeshift camp, Emma worked tirelessly to nurse Leo back from the brink. Days blurred into nights, filled with feverish care, feeding him milk from a syringe, cleaning his wounds, and whispering promises he wouldn't forget. The cub's fear began to melt slowly, replaced by a fragile trust that made Emma's heart ache. She named him Leo, a small gesture of hope, a reminder of the strength hidden in his fragile frame. But even as he grew stronger, the harsh reality remained. Leo was still a wild creature in a world that threatened to tear him apart. Every moment she spent by his side was a battle between love and the impossible necessity of release. Emma's motivation was clear and fierce. She wanted to save Leo not just for herself, but for the future of his kind, a species under relentless threat. Yet, deep down, she feared the day she'd have to let him go back to the wilderness that had once nearly killed him. It was a choice no rescuer ever wants to face, a painful recognition that sometimes love means letting go, even when the risks are terrifying. The rescue had changed everything, not only for Leo, but for Emma, whose quiet life was about to be forever transformed by the cub who trusted her enough to survive. The years since that first desperate rescue had been a relentless undercurrent in Emma Johnson's mind, an unyielding pulse beneath the rhythms of her daily life in California. Her work, her friendships, even her quiet moments of solitude were shadowed by memories of that fragile cub and the promise she had made to him. Though miles and continents separated them, Leo had never truly left her, his image etched into her consciousness like a living scar. Then came the call that shattered her routine, fracturing the veneer of normalcy she had painstakingly rebuilt. A lion, large, wild, but strangely calm, had been seen near a remote village adjacent to the reserve. The sighting defied expectations. This was no ordinary beast driven by primal fear or instinctual wariness. The report spoke of a creature that approached humans with a haunting familiarity, its movements deliberate, almost cautious, yet undeniably wild. Emma's heart surged with a complicated mix of hope, anxiety, and something deeper, an unspoken tether pulling her back across the globe. She booked the earliest flight, her mind racing with every possibility, every danger Leo might face now that he had been released into the unforgiving wilderness. When she finally stepped onto the scorched earth of the reserve, the weight of years pressed down on her. But it was nothing compared to the moment she saw him. Leo, now towering and regal, his golden mane streaked with the marks of countless battles, stood just beyond the tree line. His eyes met hers, those same luminous amber eyes, now sharpened with experience and survival. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed until nothing existed but the fragile thread of recognition that bridged the gulf of time and distance. But the reunion was far from a simple embrace. The wild had carved into Leo's flesh and spirit. Scars, both visible and unseen, mapped a journey of hardship and conflict. Around them, the atmosphere thickened with tension. Villagers eyed the lion with suspicion and fear. Whispers of poachers prowled the air like dark shadows waiting to strike. Emma's heart clenched as she realized the dangers weren't just physical threats. The fragile bond between them was at risk of being torn asunder by fear and survival instincts, clashing against love and trust. Could Leo's wild nature, shaped by years of hardship, withstand the human world's encroaching threats? Could Emma's fierce devotion protect the lion she had saved, or was their bond doomed to fracture beneath the weight of reality? In this crucible of time and danger, the resilience of their connection would be tested beyond anything Emma had ever imagined. The tension was suffocating, thick enough to choke the air itself. Poachers had been closing in for days, their presence a dark stain on the horizon, their whispers carried on the wind like a threat. The villagers, already wary of the lion's sudden appearances near their homes, had gathered at the edge of the reserve, their faces drawn tight with fear and suspicion. Emma stood at the heart of the growing storm, every muscle taut with dread. She knew what the poachers were capable of, ruthless, calculating, armed with traps designed to kill, and how easily the fragile peace between human and beast could shatter. Then, in the moment when all seemed lost, Leo's response cut through the despair like lightning. Rather than retreat into the shadows where safety awaited, he stepped forward, his massive frame silhouetted against the dying light of day. His roar erupted, a deep, resonant bellow that rolled across the valley and struck the air with raw, unyielding authority. It was not just a warning, it was a proclamation of allegiance, a visceral declaration that this was his territory now, and Emma was under his protection. The sound carried a primal weight, primal and yet somehow imbued with something deeper, a testament to a bond forged not in bloodlust, but in trust. Those watching, poachers and villagers alike, stilled, caught between disbelief and awe. The poachers hesitated, their cruel intentions wavering in the face of Leo's unexpected defiance. Slowly, almost reluctantly, they began to fall back, shadows retreating before the unyielding force of nature intertwined with human compassion. The villagers' fear, so long a brittle barrier, softened into something unspoken yet palpable: respect. In that charged silence, Emma realized the profound truth of what she'd witnessed. This was no ordinary wild animal driven by instinct alone. Leo's choice to stand by her side was a radical act of connection, a living proof that compassion, when genuine and unwavering, could transcend the boundaries between species. Emma's chest tightened with a swell of emotion as the danger passed. The moment marked more than just survival. It redefined everything she thought she knew about loyalty, about the wild, and about herself. But the story was far from over. As the dusk deepened and the valley settled into an uneasy calm, a revelation waited beneath the surface. Something about Leo's survival that defied all expectation and would alter the course of their intertwined lives in ways no one could have predicted. Yet, to truly understand the magnitude of what was to come, one must first return to the very beginning, back to the rescue that changed everything.